Hey everyone, welcome back to the Opus 14 set review, rounding things up here, and I am of course still with Jared Wallace, the man himself, Eureka. Jared, how are you today, sir?
I'm good.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Are you ready to finish off Opus 14?
Yeah, let's do it.
It never saw it coming. But you know what we did see coming, which was Shinryu. One of the coolest cutscenes at the end of Heaven's Word Final Fantasy 14 was Shinryu and Omega taking on each other, having a great fierce battle. So Shinryu has come to save us from all of our Neo X deaths and Tenzins and all these turn 1 6-cost characters or forwards. And then he has just that continued threat power of, hey, I'm either going to beat up a bunch of your forwards, potentially kill them, or I'm going to draw 2 cards. Yeah, that's to me, that's the crazy part about it. If he just had the entry effect, I don't think I'd be as high on him because I'd be like, well, you know, what if they have a bunch of 4 or 5 costs or 2 costs? He's going to miss a bunch of stuff. But they're going to want to get rid of this card because it's continued value of, hey, either I'm going to weaken a bunch of stuff or I'm drawing 2. And it's so nice to see just a light card treated with, respect, for lack of a better word, because it feels like light would just always get shafted in favor of dark. So love the artwork. Really excited about the card. I don't know if he's going to be the, when he first got revealed, I think some people thought he was going to be like, oh, you got to play this in every deck ever. It's like, I don't know about that, but he's got some really fun stuff to him, so I do like him.
Yeah, I think if you're not hard locked into a light or dark card, then, Shinryu and Sterne Leonis, we'll get to him in a little bit, but these cards look like just bang up, just pop them in there and they're going to do work no matter what deck you put them in. And I think Shinryu in particular, there's some decks that just got completely pushed out of the meta because turn 1 Tenzin or turn 1 Neo XS just fucks them up really hard. And Shinryu flips that logic on his head. It's like, okay, if they turn 1 X Death or if they turn 1 Wall X Death and you respond to Shinryu, you just win the game. That's and I know that's a lot of coin flipping, but there's a lot to be said for this kind of thing to be in the game where now Neo Exeth and turn 1 Tenzin and stuff like that, they're gonna have to pay a certain amount of respect if these cards come around in the meta. Before there's just no good answer for a turn 1 Tenzin. There's just no CP efficient answer, but now that's not the case.
Yep.
You can just reply with your turn 1 Shinryu, or if you went second, then you can play it off of 1 backup, and it's gonna be fine. And I think the big thing, if it was just at the beginning of your main phase, give everything minus 7,000 power, then it wouldn't be that hot. But because it draws extra cards, and I think in particular because a lot of the decks that are going to tend to use this, that tend to have problems against Neo Exeth and turn 1 Tenzin, they have fewer forwards in general, which means it's going to draw cards more often, means that this card definitely needs to be respected going into at least the initial format.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that maybe he won't see play all the time, but it's one of those cards that we'll see keep coming back. I'm totally sure that some deck is just always going to want the kind of flexibility that this card offers. And at the worst, if he's a 5 CP 9k that gets value every turn and just kills 1 card, that's still pretty good. That's decent. That's Agrius, so
him being out of Amaterasu range, I think, is also huge because that would feel brutal if he came in and he just hit him with Amaterasu. Yeah, really exciting card. Curious to see how he does. So we got 2 light cards again, 2 light and dark. So backing him up is, I believe her name is Macherie. And this card I know has got a lot of people excited. You mentioned her earlier, her ability, just what she can do with the summons and her action effects. Again, it was cool to see a light card. It's oh, this just seems like actually a good card, and not well, it's what I kind of like about this too is in Sterne Leonis and Omega and Shinryu, they all kind of fit this, is that you can kind of put these anywhere. Whereas again, in the past, it always felt well, the dark cards you can put anywhere, Kadaj, Veritas, Heian, whatever. But the light cards were always, well, no, you can only play that in Warriors of Light, or you can only play that in this set. So it's cool to see this card. I know you're excited about it. Tell me about her.
Yeah, this card is one of my, this is the kind of card that I want to play with really bad, because I love summons. I love playing with summons. I love control decks, and this is the static ability alone is just I want to play the card already. So I'm really down to play with this card. What I will say is people seem to be under the misconception that if you just pop Macherie into a normal deck, you'll be able to draw a bunch of cards with her effect. And that's just like not gonna happen. If you just play like 9 summons, you're probably only ever getting like 1 or maybe 2 draws off of it ever. There's 3 summons is a lot in Final Fantasy TCG, which I'll talk about a little bit more when we talk about Stern. 4 forwards is not a lot, but the 3 summons is a lot. So I think Macherie, she is going to work really well in like mono water, where you're doubling up on summon reduction with Yuna, or she's going to work really, really well in the Doga deck. I think that's where she's going to be the best. It's in Doga. You hardly ever, like Doga, the threat is to get to 9 summons, but you actually don't get there very often. So just being able to threaten it and then turning the threat into cards when you need it is going to be really useful. So I think the Doga Sophie deck, or Doga as a new archetype with just Macherie, maybe it doesn't play Sophie, that's going to be worth considering. That has 25 summons. You're going to get a lot of extra draws. You're going to get a lot of reductions with it. And I think it's awesome there. And I think so I know that the current world champion, Kurosawa, is really high on this card too, because it reduces the cost of Ultima by 3 initially, and then 1 with her own effect. So Ultima is going to be really cheap with this card. And he loves playing Waterlight. He loves Ultima. So I think that there's potential, because this comes out of Materia too, and then also reduces. You can potentially play, if you're a brave soul, you could potentially play an Ultima deck with this card too, and this card is definitely really powerful with that kind of effect.
Awesome. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see if Ultima makes a comeback because of Macherie here. Okay, so moving on. We got to get our chicken tenders ready to fry. A little 14 joke for the Omega song lyrics that don't actually exist. Omega, really cool boss in 14. Again, lovely cutscene. I just kind of enjoyed that entire raid tier in general. As far as a card here in the game, I gotta admit, this is the kind of card I just find obnoxious. So in general, I think this card is very strong. And the reason I think that is because all these end-of-turn effects that you can't react to really bug me, because it's very frustrating to have something that could deal with the Sophie or the Neo X-Death or the Kadaj, but you're not allowed to cast it. So, and I Lord knows I got my teeth kicked in by Sophie so much for her end-of-turn just dealing me damage every turn. Now, I get that Omega's not Sophie, he's not as easy to get online, but the fact that he has that built-in protection of, like, well, I mean, you can go ahead and target him, I'll just prevent him from dying, like, I don't know. Like, I hope I'm wrong about this guy. Like, I would love for him to not be a thing, but in my head, I see a world where a Sophie and an Omega are on the turn. It's like, oh, I ended my turn, so if you would die, please, I'd be grateful. So, what do you think of Omega?
Oh, I actually think I rate it the lowest of the light and dark here. Maybe about the same as Macherie, where it's like situationally, there are going to be some decks where like this is the card you definitely want to play. But I think in general, it's never going to be the default. And I think that it's a little bit easier to kill than you might expect, because it still dies on the burst. And I think in general, the thing that it's really going to hose is mono fire, which is fine by me. Yeah. So I think that's basically about it, and they're gonna have to sink some extra cards if they want to play stack chicken with the counter. Yeah. So I think that it's not a card that you can just like that you're gonna get away with splashing into just like a random deck. I don't think it works particularly well with Sophie, because Sophie needs earth and water forwards to keep her big, and you know, your opponent is always playing a game of destroy all of the other forwards so that Sophie doesn't get to go there. And Omega is just kind of like a hand wave. They like, you can't let it sit there, but the Sophie, if they're doing Omega things, then they're not doing Sophie things. And I think the introduction of like Leviathan and the Fenrir and all of the bounce is going to make Omega a little less threatening than we thought it would be on release. So
he does have that 10k power, so I hope you're right, because if I come back at the end of this opus and I'm getting Omega Sophie, I'm going to be like, you lied to me, Jared! You lied to me!
Yeah. Well, yeah, I do think that is where the balance really shines, is with this like Shinryu, the Omega and stuff like that. Like these balance effects are actually just good if they're not, if you're playing these sticky forwards that can't be broken or can't be targeted or whatever.
All right, so a card that's got everyone all a buzz, and we only saw this one when the full set got released. What a great name, Sterne Leonis, and he certainly looks the part. He's very stern. I mean, read his first line of text, and it's easy to see why people get excited about him, right? All your forwards are reduced by 1. Wait, I'm sorry, what? Like, maybe in the past I would have been like, well, I don't know, but like after seeing the nonsense Telica can do with the damn infinite loop combo, like, oh, that's kind of scary. And then moving on to his action ability, like, I'm downplaying this card in my mind, not because I think he actually is worth downplaying, because I'm afraid of him, I'll be honest, because I'm afraid I'm going to see him everywhere. I mean, Kadaj to me is still the 4-cost Dark Forward to beat. That guy's just infinitely useful, but Sterne Leonis, man, I don't like that look he's giving me, Jared.
Yeah, I think this card's a menace for sure. The static ability alone is already just amazing, right? Your Verstale costs 4 now. How many of you want to play against that, right? Like there's those kinds of things happening. You can now Chicory loop, or you can't infinite loop, but you can now do Chicories without Tilica. So you can do that in Mono Wind, or Wind Water, or Wind Ice, or whatever it is. I think Mono Wind is probably the most likely place we'll see it at the beginning, because at 1 they're going to be gaining UCP, and that's more than going to make up for the 4 CP that you sink into this. Mono Wind additionally, or most of the mono decks besides like Mono Earth specifically, I think, they don't have good ways to utilize the forwards in their break zone very often. So this is just like all of the action abilities, they're just additional value that's coming at the value of the static and the 4CP 9K body is providing you. So I think that this card, if you're not like doing something very specific with the other cards, so like for example, if you're playing a summon deck, obviously you're going to want to go for Macherie. If you're playing a hard control deck and you need the removal, you're going to want to go for Shinryu. Or if you're playing New XF, obviously you can't play this card. But like if you've got nothing, if you're looking at nothing else, you should probably just be playing Sterne Leonis. It's probably good for all of the mono decks. It's probably good for most of like even like Windwater or whatever. It's like good for all of these like generic value decks. Works really well with anything that's actually casting their cards. So Mono Wind comes to mind because you actually cast everything and you get to play a bunch of cards in one turn. But yeah, this card is just generically amazing, I think.
I think it also has secret hidden design in it, in that, for example, his first effect, it's a field ability. So it doesn't make a stack when he enters, which means guaranteed you're at least putting one thing down reduced cost. It's not like they can like kill him on the stack or whatever. And also I just have to comment, like, it's cards like this that I think really hurt monsters, because for some reason he has kill a monster on there.
Yeah.
Like, just because. Yeah. But yeah.
And I will add one more thing, because you brought up the there's no ETB, so you retain priority when you cast him and play him to the field.
Yeah.
I there was a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, but Fenrir is going to keep this card in check. And I'm like, okay, but you get to do something before they can even cast the Fenrir, right? So like, what I see is a lot of people are like, okay, I don't have to be afraid of Sterne Leonis because I have Fenrir, and then like I play Sterne Leonis, and then I discard a card to play Y'shtola, and then I combo and kill them because like the Fenrir can't even be cast, even if they discarded 3 cards from their hand to play it or whatever. And I think that's something that's really overstated, really understated about this card is like, usually in this game, like yes, there are cards that keep other cards in check, like Shantoto keeps, or like Board Clear keeps other things in check, but specifically in the case of like this kind of thing where it's like a very niche card countering so like a very niche card like Fenrir countering Sterne Leonis does not keep Sterne Leonis in check, just because the person who plays Sterne Leonis is the one who gets advantage and who gets to do control the pace of the game and play it when it makes sense, like when they immediately follow up with the Y'shtola. So I don't buy into the logic that Fenrir is going to keep Sterne Leonis out of the game.
Yeah, as I've gotten deeper into the game, I've really learned the value of when something can be reacted to, when it can't, and so yeah. Not looking forward to facing him. All right, moving on from light and dark, let's go to some multi-element, and let's start off with one of my least favorite ones. Ardyn is one of my favorite characters in Final Fantasy. I love his 7 CP card, even though I honestly don't even think it's that good, but it's just so cool, and I like Ardyn as a character, and this card's just so, like, I mean, it's not that either of the effects are bad, it's just, I don't know, and the art's so lame. Like, I don't like the way he looks in this art. Like, I don't know, like, I guess if you're doing Fire Earth and you just want a multi-element, he's in there, but
yeah, I'm a little I'm not sold at all. I don't think that there's any use case for this card. Like I was thinking like maybe the only use case is like if you're still playing Fire Earth Ritz with Phoenix, then you know maybe you need like a 2 CP target and he could be okay there. But you have Tifa and like the same thing, and that also works with Barret, and that also gets your Cloud, which is another big part of Fire Earth. So yeah, I don't think that this one has any hope. It's just vastly inferior to basically all of the other options in the game. So.
Lame art too. He's such a cool character. They made him look so hokey there. All right. Speaking of Tifa, move on to her, Fire Earth. So, and I'll kind of say this about Barret too. I think their real potential will be unlocked when the starter deck comes out, because obviously that's going to have all the other Avalanche operative forwards. So in the meantime, I mean, I think this card is fine for what it is. I honestly still think this card competes with the Opus XI Tifa. I think that card's ridiculous, just because it protects all your 7 forwards, gives them all 2k burst. So, like, for me, I'm struggling to remove that Tifa over this one. And something I just have to ask, Square Enix, if you're listening, just out of curiosity, why is every Tifa card tied to Cloud? Like, I get it. I get they were childhood friends, but there are other Final Fantasy games where, like, the Tidus cards aren't all tied to Yuna. The Zidanes aren't tied to Garnet. You know, Squall and Renoa have a huge love story, a bigger one than Tifa and Cloud. That's put front and center in 8. They're not all tied to each other. Like, I guess I'm genuinely curious, why are all the Tifas, like, always have something to do with Cloud? She can do her own thing. Same with Cloud. It doesn't have to be tied to her. Anyway, that's my rant. Eureka, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that this card, like, I agree that the Tifa and the Barret, and maybe it makes a little bit of sense to talk about them together, but, yeah, I'll just talk about them together, I think. Yeah, so I think that the Tifa and the Barret, I agree, will be unlocked when, like, their full potential will be unlocked when the starter deck comes out in October, and, like, we get all these Avalanche operatives that really make the deck, you know, a step above what we're seeing here. Mm-hmm. But I think even now, just because the new Legend Cloud is just so good, that this package is worth playing. The Barret's maybe a little underwhelming on first glance, but 4 CP 9k dodging the Titan, the Primal Titan, sorry if that wasn't clear, and turning all of your dead cards into, or like turning whatever card you want, I should say, into Cloud fodder is worth something for sure. And then Barret giving you consistent access to the Tifa, meaning the damage 6 is always a threat, is also really big, I think, there. And, you know, Tifa herself, searching in Cloud is good. For a multi-card, that's pretty good. It's just like a 0 CP 5k, but also having a static and also having that really deadly damage 6 is something that you need to keep your eye on. So I'm actually really excited to play with... I'm not huge into, like, the Final Fantasy VII decks traditionally. I don't like Cloud Pod very much, and I don't like, you know, just like Fire Earth heavy EX Final Fantasy VII. But this Tifa Barret Cloud package specifically in this Opus looks really, really enticing to me, and I'm really excited to play it.
I saw what Rain could do for WAF, given the other one's haste, so that part definitely kind of scares me a little, especially once we get those other ones. So yeah, we'll see how they do. So that was Fire Earth for this set. Moving on to our new one. It's Rosarian, Al-Cid from Final Fantasy XII. I like this card a lot. I'm really surprised, I gotta be honest, by the amount of people who are like, this card's boring. Like, oh, it does great things. Like, yeah, it does great things. Like, who cares if it's boring? Is it good? Sophie's boring. Like, anyone who says Sophie is the most boring card. Yeah, I just sit there and you die and I draw cards. How is that exciting? Maybe it's fun for you, the person doing it. Like, I think this card's really cool. It's got a lot of fun combo potential. Bring in the Al-Cid, drop Renoa for free, flicker Al-Cid, bring in Aranea, bring in this. Like, the fact that it works with both lightning and ice, I think, is really neat. And then, of course, when he enters himself, he's going to get, like, his freeze effect. And I think it's... I mean, don't underestimate when any lightning forward attacks just dull something. Like, you basically can't have blockers against this card. I think this card's really cool. You can call him boring, whatever you want. I can't wait to try him out.
Yeah, I don't think the card's boring. I think it's a really exciting card, actually. Personally,
thank you, Jared.
I also, however, I do also think Sophie's an exciting card. But
okay, fair enough.
But yes, I think Al-Cid is a super exciting card because not only is he just like generic his he could just have the enter the field ability and it would still be worth playing. I'm pretty sure it would still be like a hero or a legend worth of value right there. And then he also has the 2 autos that link up really well. So you have to he gets value when he enters the field, and then you also have to remove him after he enters the field. And that's like usually the recipe for a busted card.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that this card is especially egregious. Renoa is a sick drop here. I'm playing it in, so I have an Ice Lightning build that's playing this with, Barth and Ramu, and then I use it to bring in the Barthandelus or flicker, or bring in Renoa and then flicker the Barthandelus and stuff like that. So it's really great there. Obviously works really well with the Zeromus, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. I think one other thing that's maybe on a few people's radar but might be overlooked by a good chunk of players is this kind of effect is exactly what you want to do in Fire Ice versus Stale. So there's a little bit of element mixing here in like a Fire Ice Lightning versus Stale, where the shining cards besides versus Stale are Al-Cid and Celsius. And obviously, if you're like Al-Cidding into Celsius, and the it's just disgusting, right? And so the deck gets its other sources of lightning CP from Zeromus because the card is just like really potent, and then Gessho and Aldor Emperor. So Gessho comes in off of the it's a 5 CP, so it's a versatile target, and then it also comes in off of the Celsius, or whatever it is that you do, and you protect yourself from the Shantoto or whatever. And then Aldor Emperor is just a very solid card at clearing the board for your attackers. So there's like a nice little lightning package in there that fits in with the Fire Ice versus Steel deck very simply, and really makes use of like how aggressive the Al-Cid can be.
Yeah, I think the card's crazy. Yeah. Okay. Then we had Sephiroth. This was kind of a surprise. I mean, I guess it shouldn't have been a surprise because Aerith was the wind-water one, and obviously there's a mix of 7-14 in this set. But, he's our Ice Lightning one. And at first when I read him, I was just kind of like, whatever, Sephiroth, name clash. But I think you're playing him in a very specific deck. And, the fact that when he chooses an active forward, it's 5,000, I think that's actually a huge difference over, like, the Freya from Opus 12 that only did 4,000. And then... you can freeze a doll forward. I think the second effects actually can be sneaky really good. Freezing a forward and a discard on top of it, seems solid.
Dropped the card list and I looked at it and I was like, oh man, Sephiroth, so boring, right? That's just another Sephiroth that is never gonna see play. But thinking about it more and going into building decks, it's actually really nice that Sephiroth is, if you resolve the second ability, he's a 0 CP 5k or 2 CP 5k that makes your opponent discard 1, which is really nice in general, but also just having an extra layer of that Ice forward triggering Al-Cid and Lightning forward also triggering Al-Cid is just really important for that deck, I think. And I was a little bit worried that what if my opponent just doesn't have a dull forward, then I can't really cast this. And I think that's really negated by, again, Al-Cid. They're just always going to have a dull forward. Yeah. So, yeah. I think the card is pretty good. My only real hang up with the card is so if I'm playing Al-Cid and Ice Lightning, how often am I really going to want to wait to play this off of 2 backups? Right. And that's, kind of whatever. But I think it's, a very solid 1 or 2 of in that archetype. I don't think we'll see 3, but I also don't think it's really competing with the 7-drop or any of the other Sephiroths. So yeah, it's pretty okay.
Great.
I expect to see it.
Who seems more than okay. This is Zeromus. Got this beautiful Amano art. Again, one of the few Amano arts I hadn't seen before. He's card named Zemus in all situations. I guess you can't play the backup Zemus, but beyond that, I don't really see that being a huge issue. And just, man, this guy's scary. In particular, that at the end of your opponent's turn, they just have to dull all their forwards. And again, that doesn't target, so that'll get around things like Abraskas or a Neo X-Death or Revenge triggers. Oh man, I hope. Again, this is one of those ones that I hope he's not as good as I'm picturing, because in my head I'm like, I could see really hating playing against this card. It's just you just have no blockers. You have no blockers. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I think this card is nuts. So enters the field or attacks. First of all, we got another one of those that are like really, and it's really reminiscent of Nimbus.
Yeah,
which was really good. Yeah, so character freeze is really the selling point of this card for me. Character freeze is really, really not okay, and this card is doing it. And like Nimbus is kind of held in check because you have to like play backups first, so your opponent also gets to play backups first, and then it's like less potent. This boy comes out of Al-Cid turn 1, and you just never get to play the game.
Yeah,
yeah. I see this. I see like a grim future here, and I think that this card could have been like 6k power and still been good.
Well,
and it's like
normally the ice lightning stuff it's weaker, right?
Yeah.
Like the Sephiroth was just 5. But yeah, I was like, why is this guy 8k? Like Andy could get haste at 3. Like, ugh.
Yeah. This card just like checks all the boxes. This is like up there with Gessho for like this is how tall you must be to play aggro.
Right.
That's kind of what this card is the vibes this card has given me. So yeah, I'm all about this card. I want to play it wherever I can.
Likewise. In general, I'm really happy with what they did with Ice Lightning. Positive on those.
Yeah.
So Wind Water, this is going to be interesting to see what you think about this, because Wind Water for the longest time, YRP was just a dominant force in the game, and I'll go ahead and put it out here. Well, let's just look at Vaan. It's Vaan, your Sky Pirates. It's another 6 CP Vaan, and I mean, there's potential there, sure, potential, a lot of backup activation. I don't know. I mean, we already had good Vaans. I guess that's the thing I just kind of keep coming back to with these cards is that, look at Golbez, for example. If you're going to do same name cards, Golbez, they always give him a different effect. Each one of those Golbezes is used in a different situation. The Opus 1, the new Opus 13, who I loved, the Opus 9, this new Opus 14, like they all do something different. And I feel like all these Vaans kind of just do the same thing, just maybe in a slightly different way. And again, we still just don't have good Sky Pirates for his effect. So, I don't think this card is actually bad for what it does, but I think he suffers from a lack of support. How do you see him?
Yeah, this is supposed to be the Sky Pirate boss monster card, and it is. Like, the card itself is really good. Like, the math checks out. Is probably the best way that I would describe it. But man, Sky Pirates are just like so beaten up on that there's just like no way to make it work, I think. Like the redeeming fact, the only redeeming thing about it is that maybe the card is playable outside of Sky Pirates. Just like you just put in enough Sky Pirates to make it work in a normal Wind Water deck. But then like you go look at like I tried this morning to because FFX was updated this morning. Mm-hmm. I tried this morning to like go make a deck, and I'm just like, man, this is just not. It's not possible. Like, you can make a Vaan deck, and Vaan is going to be great, but the deck is just like it just suffers from being nickeled and dimed out of like being as good as like samurais or monks or whatever. It's just like everything is just not quite there to really make it playable. And so maybe there's a future for this card. Vaan, Balthier are okay, but like the Fran is the Fran this set is unplayable,
right.
And you have to play the Fran from Opus 10, and that one doesn't give you value back. So like you're getting Elza with this, and you're just playing like a bunch of like subpar cards to try to make this card work, and it falls a little bit flat. And it's so disappointing because the art looks so good, and the full art looks so good.
I love the art. Yeah, maybe one day, maybe if they ever give Sky Pirates some real backups or real support, maybe you'll get there. But for right now, I think he's just he's pretty. He's a pretty boy. So now we have Aerith, our other Wind Water card, which again was kind of disappointing just in the sense that people have heard me say this before on some of my other videos. Like, I'll be honest, I'm sick of the 7 cards. Like, 7 just gets so much love. There's so many Aeriths in the game. So, and I think that was my initial reaction to the Sephiroth. It's just like, another Sephiroth. And again, I was like, cool, another Aerith. And again, her effects are fine. Like, the bounce that you can do for yourself. Like, I think her effects are fine, but I have to admit, part of me, I have to push through my 7 bias. And I hate to say 7 because I love 7. 7's in my top 3 Final Fantasies. I adore the game. But in this card game, it's so saturated that every time I see one of these, I'm like, oh my gosh, another one. So maybe you have cleaner eyes than I do. How do you feel about Aerith?
I don't have cleaner eyes than you. I definitely am just like, oh, cool, another 7 card. Awesome. But this card in particular, it's nice to see that. First, it's nice to see that Aerith was given the wind-water treatment instead of, because she's just been wind up until now, and I've always felt like kind of weird about that because it kind of feels like a water character more than a wind character, but she's in wind for some reason. So, so there's that. It's nice to see that, and the card is surprisingly playable. I think I don't know if I'm like super high on it, but if you're gonna play wind-water, you're gonna play Bismarck and Leviathan probably. With the primals, this obviously works very well with both of those, so it seems like a good fit. And I think in particular for Wind Water, you kind of lack a lot of water cards that you want to play right now. There's you like if you want to play Sarah, if you want to play you're gonna play YRP, you have Yuna, and you want to play Leviathan, and that's kind of the short list for a lot of it. So having these extra ways to boost your water count and otherwise pretty playable cards is really nice. So I think we'll see Aerith. I don't think she's going to be an all-star. She's just playable enough. And, the body is surprisingly good, like much better than Sephiroth, for example, which 2CP 5k. He gets back the CP by making your opponent discard one, but Aerith being just a 2CP 7k is just fun.
Yep.
I think.
So cards that can't get bad cards to save their life is Zidane. They love Zidane. They always just give him interesting cards, and they're all usually pretty good. This is the only card in the game that outright can never be blocked. It's just pure, you can never block this card, which is just kind of nuts to me. And then, what's really nice about his on damage too is when he hits them is that it's optional. So if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. And I always appreciate that in an effect like that, because it'd be kind of lame yet if you were forced to do something. And then his special is kind of nuts because it doesn't really even matter if you can't play the card, because they just lose it anyway. It's then just permanently removed. If you can play that card, you might just be winning the game right there on the spot.
Yeah.
I know, like Hancock said in his review, like, well, Opus 3 Zidane is still Opus 3 Zidane, and I agree, and I absolutely hate that card, but also a card that can just never be blocked, period. Again, I've seen how strong unblockable is as a concept in this game. Any card that has unblockable, it's always worth a look, because that's just it eliminates a part of the game. Part of the game is getting out forwards and having them defend, which is another reason I hated Sophie. Oh, you have 8 forwards? Yeah, it doesn't matter. I won at the end of my turn. So to me, that's scary, and I think this card is definitely worth a look. But I can also see the idea, I'd rather just play the Opus 3 Zidane. What do you think?
I'm mostly on board with what Alex said in his review, which is just that this card, it works really well with both of the primals. Like, so it's going to work well with Bismarck, it's going to work well with Leviathan, and being unblockable is great, and adding to your wind-water count is great, and the special is great, and the balance is very nice. But it's just like, I don't actually want to play it. That's, I think what it really comes down to. It's just like, it's taking a forward slot, and it doesn't have an ETB, and for a card that doesn't have an ETB, it just doesn't feel like it does quite enough to really win me the game. And I think, one of the things about the Opus 3 Zidane is that as many times as you bounce it, you get to do the thing. Whereas this one, you have to use the S to really pick apart your opponent's hand. And so this one is more of an offensive card than a defensive card to me.
Yeah.
And I think that the primary role of Zidane and like these kinds of hand destruction effects in Windwater specifically is to stop you from being blown out by whatever card is going to blow you out, whether that's like a Shantoto or whether that's, I don't know. I don't fucking know. Something, whatever it's going to be, it's going to be there. And I don't think that this Zidane is really doing the same job. And the other Zidane is just going to be a lot more valuable. Now, that being said, I did consider playing both because the S ability is just good, right? Yeah. And you can bounce whatever you want. And it just came down to like, I just didn't have enough room in the deck to get it done. And I think that's kind of the syndrome that this card suffers from. This is a card that I do think it's got the Shantoto syndrome where there's so many good Zidanes that you're going to play the older one a lot of time, but in L3 and L6, this card could be an all-star for sure. Oh, it's got a great S ability, and being unblockable in that format is really huge. So I'm excited to see what it does in some of the other formats. I have the feeling it's going to fall a little bit flatter in Standard, and I don't expect to see it ruling any other formats, and I'm not quite as high as some of the other players. But
the way you said that it's a good card that you never want to play, I pictured the scenario you're opening your packs, and you're like, Zidane, this card's good.
Yeah.
Like, throw it away.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so our last 3 multi-elements, these were like, I guess, what would you call these? Classic multi-elements or legacy? So basically I realized they got one last combination for all 6 elements. So all 6 are represented here. I don't know why they picked wind, earth of all things. I feel like that needed the least amount of representation. It's Prishe. It's another Prishe. And I mean, she's essentially a 7K, right? Because if you're not paying the extra, she doesn't do anything. Like, that's the whole point of playing her. And I mean, that's a strong effect, right? For 7, and then you just pull something right off the top of the deck. Is that enough to make her worth it? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this. I think I said this a lot already, but this is one of those cards that I just don't see making the cut in standard. It's really weird to me that they gave Prishe another Earthwind card. Another Earthwind card. Like don't get me wrong, the 2CP one is garbage and there's like no way to play it, but like this was like not what I wanted the direction of multi element cards to go to. And I'm not super into this. Obviously, if you bring this Prishe out with any of the other Prishe abilities, you don't get to use the kicker either.
Right.
Because you have to cast it, which just felt like so weird to me, because I was like, that's Prishe's whole gimmick is like doing that thing. And so in terms of like targets for this, there's like Star Sibyl, which wants you to it wants you to be in standard, but then if you're playing it in standard, you want to use the old Shantoto, but this card uses the new Shantoto as a target. So like it's just like, it feels like there's so many conflicting parts, and I don't think it's quite up to snuff with the power level that standard is at right now. I could be wrong about it, and I'd be very happy for it to be wrong, because I love Earthwind in general. I like these kinds of decks, but I don't think being forced into playing Shantoto 5 and then trying to hit it on reveal 5 is like really where you want to be in standard. So I think maybe in L3, L6, where you have some more, you have fewer options for like potential deck synergies in general, but more likelihood of playing like subpar cards like Shantoto 5. That's probably where this card is going to shine the most in just getting like generic value. And it could be pretty okay there, I think. I don't think it'll be an all-star in any of the formats, but it has some potential to be like a solid linchpin for these smaller card pool formats.
14 sets in, and man, they still just like, it's like they like teasing me with name clash. It's like, oh, you know what you need? An Earthwind Prishe. I just got one, but you need another one. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's the Yuna syndrome. It's exactly, the Shantoto syndrome. Yeah.
I don't get it. Okay, so a card I'm really high on, Gessho. This is Lightning Fire, which I love for... First of all, I was only thinking of this card in Ninjas, which I think he's great in. Edge is going to reduce his cost. He's already in those colors. Ninjas already uses Fire Lightning, so unlike the Katone, where they kind of got to go off color for Earth. And then his effect, I think, is insane, because, again, I hate Opus 3 Zidane. It's like a card I would ban immediately if I was able to. And this, I think, is even worse. I mean, yeah, he's more expensive, but he's on a bigger body, and he just outright removes it from the game. Like, you can just say, hey, what's your best card? Oh, you were going to Shantoto me next turn? Yep, that's completely gone. Especially for a deck like Ninjas, which can be aggressive, and you want that if that edge comes down and you don't want to protect it, let me see. Oh, you were going to kill it with this? Yeah, that card's gone. Crazy to me. And then, so I was just thinking of it in Ninjas. Alex Hancock's made a great point in his review about Fire Lightning, that's a very reactive deck, and sometimes when your opponent doesn't put any forwards out, you don't have any kill spells, and this is a great card to just throw out there. Okay, well, if you're not going to play anything, let me look at what you were going to play. Yeah, that's completely gone from the game. So I was kind of surprised the amount of people who were like, oh, this isn't so great. It's too expensive. It's too expensive. You get to rip the best card out of their hand, and none of this, oh, Sophie, it goes to the break zone. I'll bring it back with Lena. She gone, fool. You're not getting her back.
I was a little lower on this card when it was revealed. I was like, oh, cool, a Ninja Zidane. Like, that was really all that I thought about it. I think a lot of the evaluation for this card initially was coming from, like, what people thought about Ninjas at the time of its reveal, which was like people like thought Ninjas was like really close to being good. Again, I should say, because they were kind of good in the sets before. But this card in particular is obviously great for that archetype, and it helps push it a lot. I just don't think that Ninjas are in the spot to use it. However, what really changed my opinion about this card is that you can just play it in Versailles. I don't know if I would play it in Fire Lightning, but like just being able to play this in Versatile and this coming in off of a Celsius makes me want to like vomit. It's just like it's so good, and like I can see like my opponent is just like Versatile, Renoa, Celsius, hits Gessho, and I'm like, oh, I had a Shantoto, but it doesn't matter anymore, right? Like it's just removing that board clear is going to be a really big part of how the deck functions, I think, going into the future. Because it is obviously so weak to board clear, but being able to clear out the Susano, the Shantoto, the Leviathan, you know, all of these cards, this is going to push that deck to a little bit higher than it would be normally. And obviously, it comes out at if you have, so it gets reduced by Edge, which is one thing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh yeah, this card is obviously good if you can play it for 4. But then what I didn't know was going to happen was that Sterne Leonis was going to get printed, and you would be able to play it at 4 in any deck. So. Yeah, I think that is another part of the recipe that makes this card look a lot better than it was when it was initially revealed in Card Gamer.
Yeah, I'm very high on it. Final card of the set. This is Cloud of Darkness, doing a little water ice action, which I don't know. I don't really get this card, and I know there's some talk about it and some of the discords about it. So how do we get this card to be free, or you know, I don't know, like. I like the artwork because, again, all this Mysidia art's pretty cool, but I don't know. I'm just not digging this card at all. What do you think?
I am really high on this card.
Really?
Actually.
Okay, please
so let me convince you. Okay, so first of all, do you know that it says you must draw 3 cards to turn it on? Do you know that counts your initial 2?
That's what I was assuming, because it just says draw 3 cards for the turn, so I assumed that. So basically, you just have to draw 1, right?
Oh yes, yeah, exactly. You have to draw it. So you have to draw 1, and you have to make your opponent discard 1.
Right. Okay.
You know what element is really good at this?
Ice and water.
No, actually, I understand that you would think that way, but actually it's wind, because you can just play Zidane and then Mune the Zidane, and then it's immediately cost 0.
Interesting.
So yeah, so the package that really is going to turn this on, in my opinion, is going to be wind, wherever that is, and then specifically lock decks. So you're going to use Zidane or lock to make your opponent discard cards. If you have additional ways, so if you're playing wind ice, you could play, plan, you could play whatever. There's like a billion different ways you can make your opponent discard cards if you have ice. But even if you only have wind, Zidane or lock is going to make your opponent discard a card, and you can use Mune or Chocolate or whatever you want to draw cards. There's like so many different ways to draw cards. So I actually think this is going to be 0 cost a lot of the time.
Interesting.
I don't think that wind alone is just like Zidane and Mune and Pain and all these cards is enough to make it 0 cost, because it's very hard for wind to get the discard and the draw by itself. You're relying on 3 CP Zidane to do that. So I'm not sure if I'm playing it in Wind Water or Mono Wind, but I think I'm playing it in Wind Ice and in like Earth Wind Lock, or like any lock deck. I think I'm just playing this card for sure.
And just I think to be clear, if she's reduced to 0, you don't have to worry about like the multi-element you have to pay with 2 elements. You just can put her out for free, right?
Yep, she's just a straight up 0 CP card. And I think that's going to show really, really well in Earth Wind lock decks and in Ice Wind lock decks, because she's going to be literally a free cast for Rosa. So not only are you locking your opponent and making them discard cards and drawing cards and putting out a 0 CP 8K, you're also reactivating all of your backups and getting up to that 5th cast for Rosa's flip. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value in this 0 CP card when you're playing a lock deck.
Well, you definitely sold me on it, so well done. And folks, that's it. That's Opus 14. So we're going to do a little recap here. This is the end of the multi-elements, at least, for the foreseeable future. And kind of reflecting on these, I'll start off a little bit with my reflections on these cards, Jared. What's kind of crazy to me about these cards is that, I mean, they clearly kind of open the whole game up in a way we'd never seen before. Like, it's nuts to me that I built a Sophie deck for my girlfriend. It was kind of just pure water earth, but I was able to jam in there Nimbus and Celestia and Delita, these multi-element cards with ice, and they never color lock the deck, because at their worst, you just discard them for CP of the other color. That's insane to me. That's insane. You can jam all these other elements and it never hampers the deck, which we've seen with a lot of these cards. And so on one hand, I'm like, I kind of hate that. Like, that's kind of dumb. I don't think you should be able to do that. On the other hand, I do really like that it truly has opened up these new deck types and all these things we hadn't seen before. So they're definitely a success. They are exciting, and I guess that's what you ultimately want. How do you feel about kind of multi-elements in general?
I love them. I hope we're gonna see more of them in the future. I've always loved like 2-color plus splash color decks. That's like really my jam. I think it's been very interesting the way that like for some of the cards, like their secondary element is, and because they get stronger in general when it's a multi-element card because it's harder to play. For some of them, the second element is a restriction, and for some of them, the second element is like a buff or like a reason to go into it. So like for example, like for a lot of Locke's history, it was just like ice is just a restriction on the card. It's just like you had to be able to generate ICP to play this card, even though it didn't really work well with other ice cards, right?
Yeah.
I think that goes for some of the other ones. On the other hand, for like specifically for like Sarah Mobius and Sophie and stuff, like being able to discard for Earth or Water has been really, really useful for some of these cards, or, stuff like that. And I think that's been a very interesting like duality where like there really are very specific pros and cons based on like the exact card text, whether or not being multi-element is a buff or a nerf.
That's right.
That's really cool for me. Yeah, and however, I do think that this set has, or a lot of the cards in this set have shown that you don't have to play multi-element cards. Like there is a lot of benefit into playing mono. And I when multi-element cards first started coming out, I was like, mono's dead, right? Like that was, I think that was a lot of sentiment for a lot of people. It's like you have to play 2-color now, or because they're just so powerful. And I think the past few sets and this set in particular are going to show us that like mono, there are reasons to play mono, and those are going to start shining through this set, I think.
That is my favorite thing about Opus 14 so far, in the preliminary stages, not even having my hands on these cards physically, is that it was really nice to see the mono support. And I remember when I got my spoiler and I saw the Carbuncle, and I hadn't seen a whole lot of other cards yet, so I was kind of like, is this just like a one-off attempt? Like, give him a little Earth Summon that works in mono. And so I was really pleased to see all the other cards in this set, and a lot of the primals in particular, which really do feed into mono. So that's what I think is probably the coolest thing about Opus 14 is focus on mono. Overall, this set, it's kind of weird, like, Opus 12 was still kind of the banger for me, and maybe that's just because it was the first introduction of multi-element. But, like, there's some really neat stuff in this set. I think the primals are pretty cool. But, man, there's some, like, just chaff, too. Like, there's a lot of pack filler. There's a lot of cards that feel like they're just in there because, again, most of the monsters of that, like, counter variety aren't very exciting. There's a lot of cards like Warrior of Light and just these kind of generic cards. It's just like, I don't think I'd ever want to use that. So, I don't know. I'm kind of, like, back and forth on where I feel about this. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think that there really are the two extremes where there's like pack filler and there's like, oh my god, this is so cool. Like, we're like tons of like new unique stuff, tons of new like things that have never been pushed before. But there's very little in the middle. And I think Kurosawa pointed this out on Twitter the other day. If you go like look at how many cards in the set have search, like the keyword search, there's like only like 5 or something. Whereas like the standard for like other sets is like 20.
Oh,
so
wow.
They definitely pushed the sides here, where there's like a lot of like really cool and interesting new designs, and they didn't really give us the core. They gave us like the juicy, meaty cards. They didn't really give us the skeleton, and so we kind of gotta figure out like how to build the deck around these cards and use them as best as we can.
That's fair.
And I really like that kind. That's kind of a unique part of Opus 14, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to look at it. So, question for you for kind of a meta sense. Sometimes, at least I've especially felt this way kind of since Opus 10, like Opus 10, 11, 12, 13, is it felt like something goofy would come out, and then the next set, something goofier would come out that like countered that goofy thing. Like you had Waff really rampant in Opus 10. They're like, okay, well, here's Braska's Final Aeon. Don't choose him because you're just going to get your ass kicked. And then Opus 12, well, here's all these multi-element cards. Here's Tenzin, kiss your ass goodbye. Opus 13 comes out. Here comes Big Bad Sophie. And because this set does feel kind of different, like you just mentioned, do you think there's anything that knocks off some of these Opus 13 cards? Like, I don't see anything that really hurts Sophie in this set. So, to me, that deck's still going to be just as strong as it was. How do you see that?
Okay, so this is something that I've actually got a lot of questions about. In terms of like, people are like, people seem to be under the conception that like more board clear means that Sophie is going to disappear from the meta. Like people were like saying like, oh yeah, Sasano is going to like knock Sophie down a peg because like if you Sasano and you remove their stuff, then you know it's gone forever. And I don't think that that's the most accurate approach. Like obviously, yes, more board clear is going to make it harder for Sophie to maintain a board. It's very like that is an equation. But what's really going to knock Sophie and those kinds of decks out of the meta is dying faster and getting outvalued. And those are like really the only two ways that kind of deck is ever going to disappear. Because the best decks are just the ones that put out cheap, consistent threats that they can fill up on. And they can, because removing threats is more expensive than creating them in this game. That's just the way that the game is played, right? Whether you're doing that with Sasano or Titan or Ramu or Leviathan or Shantoto, like no matter what board clear you're using, it is way cheaper for me to play Sarah Mobius, draw a card, and then play Ursula and play Sophie and then draw a card at the end and deal damage. Like if you pay 10 to go negate that and bounce everything back to my hand and then I'm just gonna do it again next turn and you had to pay 9 to stop it, right?
Right.
And that's the way it just the way it works in the game. And so like these board clears, while they're really good and they're going to push out a lot of like the cheap aggro and stuff like that, those kinds of decks, they're not what's going to keep the Sophie down. What's going to keep the Sophie down is like Locke and Rosa generating a bunch of value every single turn, or like Mono Wind and Bismarck drawing you extra cards every turn,
right?
Or Leviathan consistently getting extra 9k, because if you can't deal with it, you can consistently get an extra 9k on everything, and then suddenly it's not costing you anything to deal with these these forwards that Sophie is putting out. And so I think if Sophie is going to get knocked down a peg, it's because other decks are now competing with the kind of value that Sophie brings to the table. And I think that, you know, Bismarck, Leviathan, Gutsko is really the big one, and some of these other things, they are going to compete with the value that Sophie provides. So I do think that Sophie is going down a little bit. Will it get done? Is it like a tier 2 deck now? It's just way too early to call that. Sure. Obviously, they get to play Leviathan too, so yeah. There is that to worry about. But Wind and these monsters and like all of the other value generating stuff, it looks really good, and I would be surprised if Sophie didn't suffer a little bit, at least as a result.
That's fair.
I think everybody should have fun playing mono. This is like the first time in a long time, I think, that we're gonna be able to see a lot of mono decks in the meta again. And I think if you're playing your primals, you're probably doing some good stuff. So yeah, use those primals. Do your sick combos if you want to do sick combos, but man, sometimes it feels good to play mono.
Yeah, oh yeah, I've missed mono. I'm excited to build some decks around that. Folks, that's going to do it for these Opus 14 set reviews. I want to give a huge, huge thank you to Jared Eureka Wallace for assisting me on these, so I'm not just sitting up here ranting for hours and hours on end. And I know what a great player he is, so it's nice to have someone with that level of expertise join me. Jared, is there any place you want to give a shout out to? I know you got a Twitch stream. I can put that information below. He also writes for Final Fantasy TCG Crystarium. He's a really good writer. He actually sometimes will write up set reviews for this, so he kind of forewent that this time to help me out, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, shout out just to my team, Team Flat Earth. We're not actually Flat Earthers, but we love the icon, so we go with it. And yeah, I write for Crystarium. I haven't been streaming lately, so we don't have to plug that one, maybe, but
fair enough.
Yeah, check out my content, my teammates' content, and wish us luck in Legal A Season 2 and other online events going forward.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. Hopefully I'll get to cast some of your matches. Again, shout out to Alex of Mysidia Gaming for the thumbnails. Really appreciate it, man. Thank you to you, the viewer, for watching. Let us know below. What are you most excited for in Opus 14? You know, what primals are you looking forward to the most? Or maybe you're the person who's going to make that Steiner card work. God bless your heart. So thank you so much for joining us. Jared Wallace, I'm Travis Pfeiffer, and hey, enjoy Opus 14. Take care.
Have a good one.